And the reason is hello, wonderful people. Rebecca, June, Tamar, Nancy, thank you guys for coming. I'm a little early this morning. I want to just start and take a bit of a time. Hi, Lynn. I want to take a few minutes to just brag about my kids. Oh, that's quite a profile name. V Loki, Ruth. Nice to see you. Hi, Lulu. I want to brag about my kids for a minute. I often have people just tell me the content they like best from me. Hi, Lynn, is just when I'm bragging about my kids. And I guess just a little bit of normalcy is important. And I have 2 daughters, and I'm couldn't be more proud of them. Um, my eldest right now, she's in a competition for DECA. It's like this 4-day thing. She did it last year, and, they get to drive, in a bus to this resort at the southern part of the state and, do all these competitions. And, even she did it last year too, and she, qualified for this other kind of advanced competition. She hasn't advanced to the nationals yet, but it was kind of the, teacher was kind of astonished that she went as far as she did as a freshman because she was the only one who went that far, and, I just at this point, my kids, hi, Suzanne. Hi, Kathy. I've come to realize my wife and I will talk about this, just their power is so reassuring that they've grown into. And I've realized I just am no longer able to kind of comprehend how they even view the world, because I mean, I was talking to Will Fullwood yesterday, and he was talking about how much of our experience is derived from trauma and how much who we are. And he'd gone through this treatment where he separated himself from his trauma. Hi, neurodivergent. And you just don't realize so many of these things, the assumptions you make about life, and they're just a consequence of your frustrations you have. And they just kind of linger. And because it's trauma, I think we don't examine it all that much. And I've always recognized I carry a lot. Thanks for the hearts, by the way. The hearts really help with the growth. Hi, Ruth. Just hit the keep smashing the heart. Then I say that and it stops. See. No, that's fine. More people get in with the hearts. But yeah, we don't examine our trauma because it's too painful, and we really just don't have this. Oh, good. Neurodivergent is making the coffee. We don't have a process in the United States, and basically, so much of our culture is about trauma denial, rather than embracing trauma. I mean, we view it as weakness rather than recognize the strength of recognizing your trauma, overcoming it, so you don't pass it on to somebody inadvertently. And really, when I first had kids, I mean, I recognized I still had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn now. Um, but a couple things I was resolved on, and I just can't scream at my kids. The only exception for that is if like they were about to get hit by a car. When they were little, they were stop. That'd be the only time I would yell at them. And even then, I would apologize. Like, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but I was really scared. I thought you were going to get hit. So I resolve my, and I don't use violence against my kids. I don't spank them or hit them. And those are 2 things, and it's just like, I tell them I love them and I don't withhold praise. I never understood that. So much of this white supremacy ideology in our country is withholding praise out of fear that then you'll lose your power. I mean, there's that, it's wrong. It's the illusion of power when you've got somebody eating out of the palm of your hand, and the temptation is to just keep them there as opposed to helping them rise. You have to help and the only thing you do is you help people rise. And I guess the fear is, you see that with these white supremacists, the fear is they help their loved ones rise and then they fly away. And that's what they're afraid of. But the reality is, you have to just accept some things about life. We have to accept our mortality. We're going to get older. We're going to get weaker. We're not going to be powerful throughout to the end of our days. And if you try to resist those things, those are scary things to contemplate. It's just as scary as trauma, I suppose. Understanding that we're going to die, you're going to get old and you're going to die. You're going to get sick. And I think we see just the level of denial of people. And, I think the tyrant in charge of the government right now, he thinks he's never going to die. He thinks he thinks he's strong still when he is not strong, and he has never been strong. And just that perpetual living in that denial of reality is what causes abominations to happen. So, yeah, I'm getting slower too. I'm at 50 and I feel I know it. It's like, okay, can't do what I used to do. You lose, like, parts of the motion, like, when you're a kid, your arm can go, like, any direction, and now there's, like, a couple spots with, like, causes me pain, like, when it's turn my eyes like, "Ah!" But other times, it's like, don't just people let me just tell you this, never reach behind when you're driving your car, never reach behind to try to get something out of the back of your seat. Just don't do that. You'll thank me if you don't do that because you just end up hurting yourself. But my kids' response to life, and that's what I wanna talk about, is how they're growing into their power now, and I kind of was jokingly talking about it because 'cause we've reached this kind of bullying stage where they're picking on me a little more, and I'm just like, "Oh, shoot," you know? I never thought this would happen. I'm glad I was a nice dad because they'll they'll get a little physical with me now, and I'm just like, "Okay, I'm glad I never was mean to them." Yeah, and neurodivergent says, "The president is a direct result of white supremacy as a man who was never strong." Yeah, and that's ultimately I keep trying to emphasize, and that's what I'm gonna get into as I talk today, is the fundamental weakness of these people, the fundamental weakness of bullies, people that don't have any skills or abilities, and I'm contrasting that with my kids who have grown into strength. And when I've realized I was talking to my wife about it, is how they've come to this point, they just don't have that trauma, which wears you down, like, fighting that trauma exhausts you, and I don't know. Even as I sit before you right now, what part of me? Am I spending 20% of my energy just holding back this wall of trauma? You know, I've done it. It's probably been less over the years as I've been and trying to shield my kids from it has been the goal. And then they grow up, and it's just sort of like, my God, they got so strong, and they're still so young, and they can do things at their age I never imagined. I couldn't have stood in front of. I couldn't. I had a really hard time speaking in front of a classroom, even when I went to college. I couldn't do it. Physically, couldn't do it. I would get in front and be so overcome with anxiety, I couldn't speak. My daughters just stand in front of classroom, they give speeches, and, they give these they give the my eldest hi, Lefty Prof, my eldest does this, she does storytelling, and so she does voices, and, of course, part of that is derived from the fact that we do story time every night, and that's my great joy, is being able to do story time with them. And, I realized I just can't comprehend how they view the world now, because 'cause they've gotten to this point without this extreme trauma, and I think the trauma is going to come. Hello? I mean, trauma is unavoidable in this life, but if you can give your kids the advantage of just allowing themselves to develop into who they're meant to be before they have to get to the trauma, um, w me too what were you say? Oh, yeah, me too about what? Neurodivergent? I lose track of what I'm talking about. If you can allow your kids to at least get to like 20, and I really don't feel we are fully formed until we're about 26 or 27. And then you're kind of like, okay, this is who I am. And other than that, you're vulnerable, right? And people that are, oh, it's public speaking. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you found a way to do public speaking too. That's something to overcome. A lot of people have to overcome it. I think our collective fear of speaking is often a direct result of American trauma. People just don't realize how much trauma there is involved with just growing up in the United States of America. This is a trauma inflicting society. A lot of our traditions and customs traumatize us. And that's why there's so much hostility here and so much frustration. And that was the title. Um, Frustration is the consequence of disregarding the truth. Um, but yeah, my kids are so strong now. My youngest is a basketball player. They had a game yesterday and they won. She's been doing this league that's like this preparatory league for the last 5 years. So they've trained a lot. And so now that they're doing middle school basketball, they're just dominating the other teams. Yeah, I should get into a Toastmasters. That would be good. I should do that. That would be fun. Just give me a chance to go talk to some other people. I should talk to Will about that because he was talking about coming up with places to have his anti-racism discussions. But yeah, I should go do that. And then I have to sit and listen to the critiques, and it'll make me it'll make me less inclined to just come here and be relaxed. But this is kind of my Toastmasters. Anyway, yeah, my youngest, their basketball game, they won 73-3, I think, yesterday, and it was just like it's kinda hard to watch those games when they win by that much. They weren't being mean. They were playing, but it's like, you get into that concept, and another thing I wanna talk about today, and because Lefty is here, I'll talk about humility, and I was just thinking because, and we've been kind of talking. This has been a nice discussion with Lefty Prof about humiliation, which is the word that we kind of resist, but humility, you know, is a good word. Being humble is a good thing. Humiliation is a process that will make you humble, right? And yes, it can be done in a way that's cruel. But I've been thinking about this a lot actually since Lefty brought it up. And I don't mean this as like an attack. I mean this as interesting comments. And I sit in my car and I'm ruminating on them for hours and hours and hours. Yeah. And I think white supremacists, the one thing about white supremacists is they never want to be humiliated. We've heard that about the president. How there's this story about his dad dumping mashed potatoes on his head, and he was just so enraged by that. It's just kind of like that moment. He was just like, I never want to be humiliated again. But the reality is humiliation. Let's put that word aside and just say learning to be humble. Yes, it's a lovely discussion we're having. Let's be proud. It's really important. And learning to be humble is critical to your development as a person. And I mean, that's probably part of the reason why you avoid processing our trauma, because trauma is humiliation. The things that have happened to you are always humiliation. And so and the white supremacy mindset is like, okay, let's just compartmentalize that, put that, like, just bury that deep down. Like they said in Talladega, just never talk about it again. Just bury it, just push it down. It's gone. Yeah, it's gone. And it's like, it's there. Unless you process it, unless you work through it, it's there. And this is, and as I sit here now, with my wonderful kids, and I realize I think I effectively shielded them from my trauma. I think I did. Although we'll see what they say in 20 years. I think they'll have things to complain about me. And that's fair. I mean, because I was far from perfect. I've always been far from perfect. I've tried hard to overcome the traumas that I've had, but I've tried not to pass them on. But they're just gonna be starting at this platform that's higher. I mean, they're already at higher than I was when I was, like, 25 or 26 because they got that, awareness and the confidence, and they just know that they deserve to be treated with decency, They know that. It's been their whole life up until this point. And again, most Americans don't get that experience. They don't have that awareness that they deserve to be treated with decency. And I think that's ultimately the issue. That's why so many people would vote for this just horrific person. This punishment grievance-based person, because that's all they know. That's all Americans know. And I mean, it's sad, when you think about it, how people are just like, "Yeah, ha ha," and then they just subject themselves to more abuse, and I've seen people that have been extreme right-wing MAGA who have abusive parents, and then they spend all their time, in this trauma bond where they're talking about how great their parents are, just trying to convince themselves as they try to convince you. And it's a sad thing to watch, and if you try to say, "Look, it sounds to me like your dad abused you," they respond with hostility, and this is really that space we need to be in. But I wanted to talk. I left some notes. I thought I'd be because I wanted to cover this. Humiliation, humility, being humble. I mean, if you're in a class and you get, it's a math test and you get one right out of 100, you're gonna feel a little humiliated, right? We need to inflict that upon kids so that it's like, "Okay, you didn't do the work." And it's like, I just think that we say the word humiliation and it instantly the white supremacists take over and they're just like, they instantly divert the conversation. And then we just kind of follow on behind, like at the whim of what the white supremacists think. "Oh yeah, we can never humiliate anybody." But it's like the entirety of religion, "You're a sinner." That's humiliation. Everything is humiliation. But it's like we never apply the same uh, sensitivity to all these things that are the white supremacy establishment. And a really important thing, yeah, I would love to neurodivergent. Yes, send me a neurodivergent said, "Are you interested in coming on to Mind Haven, Walt?" Yes, I would love to. Set that up. We'll set that up. Um, but we get into this misconception where we can never this misconception that we can never push back against white supremacists because if we humiliate them, they'll just become more set in their ways. That's kind of like this operating thing. And we need to just completely remove that. Um, Yesterday when I was talking to Will and Margaret and Sima, it was interesting because there was kept moments in that conversation where they would make an assumption that I felt the need to address. Like, And, the assumption that, for example, that billionaires worked hard. I'm like, "We don't have to assume that. We do not have to assume that billionaires worked hard. We do not have to assume that they earned their money." And why do we do that? It's like, okay, if you earned your money then, prove it. Let's see a transcript, the pay stub for every dollar you earned. Show us where everyone came from. Let's be totally transparent. And if you are what you say you are, you can prove it. And they become hostile, right? Yeah. Well, humble is a good word. It's important to be humble. And it's like, but we make these deferrals, and so much of things are false arguments. Like a guy will come stomping in the room. Look at all that I have. I must be rich. I must be accomplished. It's like, no. I don't have to assume that. You got a lot of stuff. Maybe you killed people and stole it from them. You know, prove that you got it. You still have to go. Oh, how dare you? You've humiliated me by forcing me to prove that I am what I claim to be. And it's like, you're misusing the word humiliation. I think I'm just doing due diligence here. But I wanna talk about my own experiences with humility. And, yeah, there have been a couple times when I've been at rock bottom. Um, and I think it's important to be at rock bottom. Um, and in saying that, okay, let me contrast with what I was just saying about my kids. Uh, I don't inflict this suffering on my kids. I mean, there are times when my kids have had encountered challenges where they haven't succeeded. You feel humiliated when that happens. And so, my response as a parent is to say, well, and just act disappointed. You show support then, but you don't deny that they didn't do as good as they wanted to. You don't like pretend that wasn't the case. You don't hide the fact. You don't bury the truth like white supremacists always do. Let's just pretend that doesn't exist. No, you say, "Look, you didn't do as well on this test as you wanted to do. It's okay. You're a smart person. You're a good person. You have the capacity to do this. Let's sit down and do the work, get it done." And you just kind of erase because otherwise, if you're just like burying, okay, like that test, and it's like if you just deny it, you deprive yourself of the ability to grow. And that's why I think an emphasis on being humble is something that this society needs. Yeah. I wanna talk about growing up, uh, my mom always did this ski race, you know? Yeah, well, I mean, and I'll get to that in a second. I wanna talk about the academic context, but, my mom always did this ski race, right? So I lived in this conservative rural area, um, where women were treated like crap. I mean, honestly, because every single and let's just stop pretending that's not the case, Everything conservative treats women. Hi, Cat. Great to see you, Cat. Everything conservative treats women like absolute shit. And I think that people that treat women like shit deserve to be humiliated. And I'll do that. Somebody starts coming up to my daughters and telling them bullshit about how they can't have such and such a job. Yeah, they're not going to leave that situation smiling, and it's not going to be from physical violence. I'm just going to talk them through. It's like, well, what can you do? Show me something you can do. How good are you? You're not that good. I don't think you should run your mouth off like that. What the hell's wrong with you? And this comes from I used to watch my mom used to do this cross country ski race. It was this 50-kilometer ski race. And, she always got so much shit from everybody in my dad's extended family and just from general people in the community. They just treat women like shit. And my mom signed up for this prestigious 50-kilometer ski race, and it's not like she'd win, but she'd do it. And it was something that I followed in her footsteps, and I've done too. I was telling you about it last or yesterday. I did it last week. And there's, you're not that fast and you cross the finish line and you get that sense of accomplishment because you have achieved something, and it's a big thing. It doesn't matter if you're fast or not. You've done 30 miles, you're exhausted, and it just hits you in a place that even people who are critical can't take it away from you. Um yeah. Uh I want to say Diane's comment. Just look at the orange tyrant, criminal laughing about the women's Olympic hockey team with the men's Olympic hockey team. And so that's really important because I grew up in this mindset of these asshole conservative men. And they would always sit around at these family gatherings, talking about how great they are. And then my mom would just go out and do this 50K ski race, and none of them could do that. And she would beat them routinely in physical things. And so it was so important. This is a thing. Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. And it's so important for me. That was so important for me to have that example. My mom did. You didn't even have to speak. You just go out and it's like, okay, throw down. I did this. I've run a marathon or whatever. What have you done? Nothing. There's a story I told because my mom, she used to be a hunter. She would hunt with my dad. That was his thing. And it was her way of like trying to keep the family together. And so they'd go like elk hunting. And she doesn't particularly like it, but it was something she did to try to be well, she did to try to maintain the relationship. "This is something you love, I'll try to do it." He didn't reciprocate, but he did the ski race once, but then he never did it again, but she would try to do these things, and, she'd she'd gone and shot this elk, and it was like this super it was a super prestigious rack, and, we were talking about it at a family gathering, and somebody had to deride her achievement because this was around all these conservative guys, and they were just like, well, they felt threatened. Yeah, yeah, Vegan Cindy. It's not. She regrets it. She regrets it. It's not a thing, and that's something though. That's an interesting. I was thinking about that as you said that. Because you get indoctrinated, and when I was growing up, the whole hunting culture was huge, and, I never shot a deer, but I did go hunting a lot, and I've tried to think about what happened there because it doesn't resonate with me, and since then, my mom has gotten away from that, so it's one of those things where she's regrets it deeply, and she's like, that wasn't part of me." But if you're in a situation where you're in an abusive relationship and you're just like and then these abusers come to you and they like, "Well, if you only do this, the abuse will stop." And then you try to do that, and then they make you do things against your inner nature, and then they kind of feel like they have you trapped. So it's all part of this whole, uh, culture of oppression. But yeah, she doesn't now. I mean, now she keeps she patrols her property to make sure people aren't out there hunting. So yeah, but I'm glad you brought that up, vegan Cindy. It's not something that she's really proud of in her past, but I mean, we survive and we learn. Hello, Derek. But anyway, we were sitting around and she killed this elk, and the men were just deriding the achievement. And like this is what Diane was saying. Like the men, even when women surpass the men, these conservative men just get into that state of denial and they have to run down the achievement. And one of the guys said, "Well, your mom just had one lucky shot." And I was like 10, and I turned to him and I said, "That's one lucky shot more than you ever had." And then, I mean, this ties into what I was saying about humiliation. He shut up. I mean, I was like 10 and I shut this guy up. And, yeah, it was it's an important moment. I think it's important for him. You have to stand up for the people you love. But yeah, I mean, yes, vegan. I keep saying vegan. I'm sorry. I don't know why that's getting into my head like that. But yeah, we have all done things we regret. It's understanding she was the subject of abuse too. So I'm glad she got out. And yeah, we've helped each other. My mom has helped me get out of that, and I've helped her. And we've had our disagreements over the years because of that frustration you get when you're denying the truth, which is what I wanted to talk about. But yeah, you're in those abusive situations, and that's the whole key. And I mean, so much too about what's going on in our society right now. These illusions of a disagreement and these conservatives who force us to do things that are against our inner resonant nature, they cause through constant pressure, they're constant pressure. And then having done something that we makes us feel guilty and is a trauma, an act of trauma, they want us then they pressure us as if, well, now you're forever part of our group. You can never escape. There's just lies piled on top of lies when it comes to these people. Um, but I wanted to talk too about because Lefty Prof was saying where we were talking about that process of humiliation. And I had a physics teacher. I think his name was Paul Thomas. I wrote it down, and he was just telling a story about how he'd gone to a conference, and the person who came up and spoke clearly didn't know what he was talking about. And in a scientific community like that, Paul Thomas was kind of shaken by this. He's like, it got really ugly. People were like, nope, nope, because of this, nope, nope, because of this. And they were challenging the guy, and the person who was speaking, went away in tears. Sort of like, okay, humiliation. That's bad. But what's the other side of that? Just letting somebody who knows nothing speak and dither and babble and have power? I think we see the consequence. If we're like, "Oh, I'm not gonna humiliate that guy who's speaking nonsense. I'll just let him appoint a cocaine heroin addict to the Department of Health, and he'll eliminate all vaccines?" Yeah, and Heather Wynn says, "Standing up to bullies is the only way out." Yes, it appears more and more people, organizations are getting courageous and standing up. Strength begets strength. Yes, and I think that's really why we have to, because it's tempting for good people to just sit there and say humiliation is wrong, humiliating, and I certainly agree with that as a parent. I wouldn't wanna humiliate my kids, but having to face your moments of humility are important, and in a way that's not traumatic. So I think white supremacists make us kinda believe, they get us in this binary thinking where it's like all forms of humiliation are bad, even though then they turn around and leverage humiliation wherever they can. They tell us we're not good enough. They tell us our suffering is because, we don't work hard enough, or we don't deserve a raise. Everything that they do is humiliation. But the second we point out, it's like, actually, your guy in charge of the Department of Health knows nothing. Well, how dare you humiliate me? That's so inappropriate. So we have to look through this. We have to, and like I said, we become frustrated with the right. And the reason we're frustrated with the right is we're not allowing ourselves to just process our trauma and just recognize the truth of what they are. We keep hoping for them to not be just evil. And they keep showing us again and again that they're evil. You restrict vaccines for children, that's torture. That's child torture. And if it humiliates somebody to have to hear that, so be it. Because their humiliation is less of a price than the death of a child, right? So that's what we have to kind of just process and get through. This is a complex idea. So I mean, thank you for all the lovely comments back. There's been a little thought. Let me see. Megan and vegan have one little difference in spelling out, bigger difference in pronouncing comb and tomb. She's putting it to me. Come and home. English frustrates her. Right? Yeah, I get into that sometimes. So that's nice. But I want to say too, like, I started doing that ski race my mom did, because of her example. And even though all the men around me were deriding her and trying to humiliate her for her achievement, uh, I see it's just like the reality of it broke through, right? And so I could see that's a wonderful achievement. That's something I want to do. I would be proud to cross that finish line and know I did it. And so I did it the first time. Of course, my mom beat me by like hours. And so that was a good thing right away, because all those years you grow up in these conservative societies where you're just pressed with this just disrespectful and misogynistic viewpoint of women. And to just get out there, it's like, okay, and it's really easy to sit around a table with a bunch of other dudes and to deride, groups that you, for whatever reason, you feel a need to crush. And it's really easy to sit around and do that. If you get it, it's like, okay, let's strap on a number. Let's go see how good you are. And then they go beat you by 2 hours, and it's like all that talk, all of a sudden the volume on it gets turned way down. And that's another issue we have with these conservatives. They do not put themselves in positions where they can lose, because they know they will lose. And so all the years, I mean, I dated a girl for a long time and she was faster than me. And it's just like, okay. And it's just having respect for how athletic women are. And actually, I need reminders. And not too long ago, my daughter's been in the swim team. And, she'll get up in the morning and train for 2 hours. Well, she's just like, "Daddy, let's go to the pool." And I'm like, "Okay." And she just whipped me, and it's just like, "Thank you, I'm glad you did that." It's like, I know you were good. I understand how much better you are. It's like, "Let's go race." She just destroys me in this race. And it's like, I'm not coming at this from a misogynistic person, but I still needed that actual real reminder of how good she is. And the reality of it, and that's not theory anymore. You've experienced it. And part of that is because I was willing to be humiliated by her, which isn't a bad thing, or be humbled. I was humbled by her. And it's good to be humble. Go through life being humble. And you see a lot of these brash white supremacists, they're stomping around criticizing everything, everyone and everything. They're denouncing, like the president denouncing the women's hockey team. I'd like him to get his buddies and get on the ice against them and just get slaughtered by by the women's hockey. That would be comical, and he'll never do that. He'll just sit there. How good they are is like just beyond his comprehension because he refuses to put himself in a point of vulnerability, and that's why we get people that are willing to concede with grace, because when somebody defeats me, so good for you. You were better than me. And when you get these white supremacists who refuse to admit that they can be beaten because they never allow themselves to be humbled, because they disrespect the concept of humility, that's when we have atrocities. That's when we have loss of life. I want to read what Kat said here. I swear I did not realize my family was evil, the things they have done to me and my kids, and then they feel totally justified in doing it. It's unbelievably so sad. I always appreciate you articulating it. Yeah. And we were talking, that came up yesterday in my group. I was with Will and the others, where somebody said, I'm sure white supremacists, somebody said this, I'm sure white supremacists love their kids. Don't assume things like that. Don't assume it. I've seen how white supremacists treat their kids. They torture them, they torture them emotionally and physically and sexually, and they create this trauma bond, but they are quite willing to sacrifice their kids. They're quite willing to see their kids die. And they're just, oh, that's the end of that problem, and then they pretend and they have their drinks and they like they tell stories about the kid that are all lies, how much they cared about the kid when they never did anything for them. But I mean, we live in a country that won't, we refuse to do anything about these mass shootings because white supremacists want school shootings to continue. You need to start saying that. Republicans want there to be school shootings. They want it to happen. They want the kids to die in these schools. It's funny because you'll talk to Republicans and they'll say, well, everybody's against, it's like, we need to do something about our rape culture. Well, everybody's against rape, they say. It's not the fact. You Republicans are totally for rape. It's clear, but, well, how dare you? Because then they feel humiliated. But that's the reality. Look at what they do. Don't listen to what they say. That's the other thing. The difference between somebody just saying who's the best athlete and actually the one who wins the race. And we have to just switch over because white supremacists have dominated our responses to so many things. We have these instinctive, responsive and reactions. Well, we're not allowed to say that. And I keep having to attack, or not to attack, but challenge these things. Do not assume a billionaire earned his or her money. Make them prove it. It's just as likely they murdered somebody or a lot of people or a lot of somebodies or millions of somebody to get all that money. The church got a lot of its money from burning women. Burning witches, they called it. They would seize all their assets. Church is still sitting on all that money, on all that property that they seized. And then they use that funds to influence things, to perpetuate further atrocities. And it's just, I mean, and like I keep saying, you feel frustrated. That's the topic again today. Frustration is because we deny the truth. And you want to believe that your parents or your family or your friends are kind to you. Yes, the Berkey. Yes. You want to believe that. And even when they repeatedly show that they're not, and they're cruel to you, and they're mean, and they keep letting you down, and you feel frustrated every time they do that, you shouldn't feel frustrated. That's what I expected you to do. If you expect them, if you recognize how bad they are, I mean, these, legal bans on abortions are evil. It's evil. Stealing. I wrote a note the other day. At what point in the United States do we even have our bodily autonomy? That's everybody. I know that, I mean, we've all endured. It's just part of like the patriarchal system. Men who have had the mind virus of these patriarchal systems, white supremacy is a patriarchal system. They feel they own your body. They will assault you. And as a child, multiple times, I was assaulted. And it's just one of those things where you don't even want to examine it. But every single right-wing person, their sexual assault is a feature of their ideology. It's not an exception. It's a feature. A couple of months ago with Shane and Arturo, we went through this list of all the Republicans that had been accused of sexual assault, like in court and found guilty of it. And it was a list of like 1,500 people because it's a feature of their ideology. And this whole rape culture thing's not going to go away. And that's why we shouldn't be reluctant to humiliate people when they, if they are the president and they stand in front of a room and they say a bunch of nonsense, ask the follow-up questions until you see him getting very frustrated. And if he can't answer, and if he becomes humiliated, and if he goes into narcissistic collapse, you save lives. So you have to overcome this idea of saying, well, it's mean for me to humiliate this person publicly like this. Because if you don't, you let him have the power to hurt others. And that's a critical thing for people to understand. Yeah, Diane asked, "Is it the Berkey? I did that race years ago. It was a great experience." I have my bib here, Berkey. You can see. I did my 23rd. Whoops, can you see that? There it is. 23rd Berkey. That's the bib. I'm a Birchlegger. I've done it 20 times, so it's kind of a cool thing. My mom's a Uberlegger. She's done it more than 30. All right. Neurodivergent says, "I'm a former English language teacher with focuses on pronunciation, pragmatics, and writing. A lot of times, neurodivergent is just because my thoughts get ahead of my mouth, and I'm just like I'm saying a word that doesn't come up yet. So, yeah, I'm an English teacher too. Hi, Natasha. Always wonderful. Wonderful. See, I'm getting tongue tied now. That's your fault. Melanie says, "All yours." Bye. Okay. I wonder what that's in reference to. All right. Yeah, he can't stand, and that's another thing. These guys, this the white supremacy thing, the guys that stand and they're bully culture. And this is another thing I wanted to mention. It's a little bit of a sad story, but my grandpa used to be this way, where he would just kind of and it was just his thing. He's like, "I'm all tough," and he'd come up and kind of give you like a little, and as I got to be 18 or whatever, when I was young, I was kind of shaky, and it was like supposed to be affection, but it was also kind of aggressive. That was just the way he was, and I dealt with it and dealt with it, and finally, when I got to be 18, he's doing his thing, and I'm just like, "No," and I knocked him down, and, it's just sort of like, I didn't mean to do that, but it was just that there was this illusion of this was the dynamic of our relationship where he would come home and beat on me, and finally, I just had enough of it. I didn't initiate this, but I just didn't realize how fragile he was, and I felt awful about this, but at the same time, don't come up and start pushing me then. And just this expectation that I should sit there and absorb. And I loved him. He was wonderful. But this was just a thing. Sometimes people just have these things, and until you call them out on it, even if it potentially humiliates them, it's like, look, stop doing that. I don't like it. We don't make those comments enough because we've got this resistance to humiliating people. But I guess just use the word a lesson and being humble. Being humble is a good thing. It's so important. You can't get through life unless you're humble. And I think we've kind of forgotten the importance of being humble because white supremacists have turned everything into this. Well, you're attacking me by making me feel humiliated. They do that when you're like, well, that's a racist thing to say. Well, now you're calling me a racist. It's like, I said the thing you said was racist. Do you denounce racism? But we retreat from that because they're just like, don't humiliate me. They've established all these ways of thinking that perpetuate their toxic mind virus. All right, let me keep going here. Natasha says, "Yeah, that's hard for me to believe. You have that much darkness. How can any part of you be genuinely loving?" Yeah, they aren't. I need to have a longer talk about how abusive these white supremacists are. They are so abusive to their kids, all their kids. Yeah. And so Lefty Prof says it is complex. The story of the speaker your teacher was referring to seems to suggest that public humility will lead to inner humility. I can see that. Yeah, there's different contexts too. Because yeah, okay. So maybe the issue is being publicly humiliated versus like take somebody aside. But if somebody is at the point where they're at a platform and they have a podium and they're talking to a lot of people and they're telling lies, that needs to stop. And that is going to humiliate that person. But the danger of allowing them to speak lies to huge groups of people is worse. But I know what you're saying, Lefty Prof. I come to an event where I didn't prepare enough, and even though nobody attacked me for being unprepared, I learned never to come. Yep. So there's all these different scenarios too. So that's a really good one. And yes, and I've learned too after being humiliated in a bad physical, like a bad race or a bad test or something, I better be prepared. So I'm humble, not thinking, oh, I'm going to just blow through this. And it's just having respect for other people's time. This is a great comment, Lefty Prof. I think there's another side. Has humiliation led to some of these red hats becoming radicalized? That's interesting because, it's not the tool, it's how the tool is used. And I'll say this too about the left looks at a hammer and says, "Hey, let's use this hammer to build a house." And now homeless people can have a house. The right sees a hammer and they're like, "Oh, let's use this to murder people." So they murder people. So then the left says, "Oh, geez, that hammer can be used for murder. I'll never touch it." And it's not the hammer. It's how it's used. So we can't deprive ourselves of the tools that can be used to create a better world because white supremacists use it incorrectly. But yes, humiliation, I think actually, growing up in these white supremacy cultures, they deliberately humiliate their kids so that when they get into school, it's part of their attack on education, so that they when they're humiliated by their teacher, when their teacher says you didn't do good enough, they're so triggered by that that they just reject education at that point. So, I mean, we have to save these kids that are living in red areas. That's another one of these things that I told you before. I grew up in a cabin my parents built in, like, as far off in the middle of nowhere as anybody can imagine, and there were no resources for me. And I made it to here because of luck and a lot of other a combination of other things and just it's a miracle, honestly, to get out of a place like that. And I'm here to tell you how cruelly children are treated in the United States, and it has to be fixed. And so much of the blue, like the silver spoon Democrats, they don't listen to me when I try to tell them and they're just indifferent. And I often get that, well, you're part of the problem, they say to me with some of these things I'm trying to talk about. I get that instant dismissal all the time. These systems of child abuse continue. They're perpetuated in these red areas. Kids are abused in those areas, and we have to help those kids. And I understand that we're frustrated at the parents, the MAGA parents, but the kids are innocent, and we have to help them. And white supremacy targets kids, and that's what we have to recognize and stop. All right. Yeah, no, that was wonderful. Lefty says, just brainstorming out loud is wonderful. That was a wonderful comment. Thank you. Oh, yep. Diane said, yep, the love is very conditional. Uh, especially and their Christian nationalism, everybody needs to know the word Christian nationalism is another word for white supremacy. And I keep telling this to people, white supremacy is a rotten branch on the tree of Christianity. White supremacists think they're Christians, Lutherans, Protestants, white supremacists. But the white supremacists want to kill all the others. That's why we're in the midst of this religious war. This Republican administration has been more anti-Catholic because all the immigrants from South America are Roman Catholic. I lived in South America. It's astonishing. They all love the Pope. We never talked about the Pope much when I was growing up in the United States, even though it's supposed to be a Christian society. But this is why they conflate all these things. When the Republicans say there's a war on Christianity, there's actually a war on white supremacy. And it's just important to understand these dog whistles that the right uses. When they say it's always been a Christian nation, it's always been a white supremacist nation. So they're exchanging these words. And so once you kind of recognize how they're talking and what their actual words mean, everything starts making sense. So let me see what neurodivergence said. My Chinese students had internalized authoritarianism and mainly would show shame when they made mistakes. That's us too, though. That's Americans too. I would make everyone make mistakes on purpose and then tell them that all English speakers make mistakes in English all the time. Yeah, this video is an example, even their teacher. And yeah, I mean, when I was learning Spanish in Peru, our teacher she'd notice we were getting frustrated. We'd go out for a drink because it makes you better. I don't know if you, what age you're teaching neurodivergent, but it helps you learn a foreign language if you just kind of relax, put aside your inhibitions and allow yourself to practice. Natasha says, I thought they wanted kids here to rape. Why do they also want them killed? Well, they want educated kids killed is what it is. Republicans always attack education. They use their voucher systems to defund it in the House. When I was growing up, all we ever heard too, and my family were teachers in my family, and all they ever talked about was running down all those know-it-all teachers, blah blah blah. And we see that in this administration, they don't hire any kind of experts. So because white supremacists know that rational critical thought is fatal to their ideology, and then they start in with their don't make me feel bad about myself. See, that's how they've leveraged humiliation. It's like, don't ever make me feel humble because that makes me feel bad about myself. Just look at how all that is piled up. Humility, respect, accountability. That's what we have to go back to. Judith says, it's amazing how in New York City, we don't have mass school shootings. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you don't. I haven't actually done a real look into that. It's always white kids. I know there's a couple of web pages where they've been tracking it almost always. But I mean, the exception, it's sort of like 99 out of 100 pedophiles are men and 99 out of 100 school shooters are white boys. And as a scientist, you never say all, but it's white supremacy. Every mass shooting is an act of white supremacy. In more liberal areas, you would not believe it. Some of the, because I grew up too in the time when people just had guns in their cars at school. Natasha says, like, nothing makes sense. Oh, I was going to say, it would be interesting to look at where these school shootings are happening. Like, what is the size of the area? Are they in the suburbs? I haven't done that yet. I haven't I don't know, are too many of them rural, extremely rural? It seems like it's kind of like the rural places are so indoctrinated with conservative teaching that maybe they don't have school shootings there, but maybe it's in those places where there's like a suburban area where there's an influx both of liberal representation and conservative representation. So then there's the conflict. I haven't thought of that before. That's another brainstorming out loud. That'd be something to look into. Um, Diane says, my kiddo is queer, and my Christian nationalist sibling said my kiddo wouldn't be if they had been raised well. Yeah. The anti LGBTQ community is just fundamental to Christianity and to white supremacy and any form of fascism. Um, yeah. Okay. Okay. Natasha said, like, essentially let them, they watch them fall into a well and then scold them and tell them why they were stupid. Yep. That's exactly the kind of thing. There'd be a lot of times, I'd be 10 and they'd hand me, okay, do this job. And they'd hand me like some piece of equipment that you're not supposed to use until you're 25. And then I'd hurt myself. Well, what's wrong with you? Why would you go and hurt yourself with that? It's like, you shouldn't have put me in this position to get hurt. And if there was a lot of jobs I did where it was just like, I thought I was going to die a lot, like working on farm equipment, driving tractors you shouldn't be driving when you're a kid, you get hurt. And then these white supremacists who just want to abuse their kids, then they look at it as if, they blame you for it rather than their complete lack of responsibility as an adult. There's a lot of stories like that. I'd have to sit and brainstorm a few more, but yeah, these rural farm communities are just evil. The way they treat kids. First of all, too, there's that assumption that the rural conservative family owns their children and that they can put their children to work. That's an assumption that's prevalent. And I recently was a couple years ago now, where there was this thing going on, it's like the parental bill of rights. Oh, we deserve to know all the things that teachers are teaching our kids. And it's like, you are not qualified to go through the curriculum. You hire an expert to teach your kids because you are not qualified to be a teacher of your kids. And this has been an ongoing battle in the United States, because we allow the white supremacists to do this as if they can erode the quality of education that all kids get because it makes them uncomfortable because they are unwilling to acknowledge they are lacking and they are unwilling to be humble and improve themselves and recognize their mistakes. And so I was saying, it's like, we need a student's bill of rights. If you guys are going to talk about a parental bill of rights, we need a student's bill of rights. Because the reality is the majority of kids who are abused by their parents. And that gets the white supremacists all riled up. And if they're humiliated, how dare you? Now you're accusing me of being abusing my. And it's like, I said a fact about where most child abuse comes from. If that makes you humiliated, that's on you. That's not my fault. But too often on the left, we're inclined to retreat from these conflicts. We have to stop retreating from that because we're surrendering kids. So a lot of what I'm trying to talk about today, I guess, as I kind of brainstorm through, as to use Lefty Prof's words, as I brainstorm through what the purpose of this is just allowing ourselves to take on the arguments, even if it breaks a couple eggs. But if it makes a bully feel humiliated, they'll stop being like. Sometimes that's a very effective way to change their behavior. Can it make them more dead set in their ways? Yes. Can it stop them? Sometimes it can. And it's important that we not just completely dismiss this tactic because humility is important. Um, yeah. All right. Let me see. Okay. Kat has a comment here. With my dad does, it's like something bad happens because you're a bad person. Yes. That's a big thing to overcome. Like everything wrong that ever happens to your life, they take as proof that you are fundamentally flawed and bad, and you should just subjugate yourself to you are now a supporter of their greatness rather than you should have a right to do anything. So that concept of saying we are not the worst thing we ever did is a really important point of emphasis. Um, so we can stop avoiding our trauma. We can process it. And also then, because the white supremacists cut off those barriers in our mind, or they install barriers in our mind where we refuse to even think of certain scenarios. Like, you're like, this relationship, it's like if you're in a relationship with your dad, you're like, this isn't working. And it's like, without even saying so, they always establish that no contact is just off the table. Like that just doesn't even exist. And it's like, look, if we're going to have an honest conversation about how to fix things, every possible alternative has to be available. But they install within us this thinking that it's like, well, I can't ever, he's still my dad. I can't it's like, you can go no contact if you have to. All right. Yeah, Kat says, and then if you get raped, it's because you did something. Yep, that toxic rape culture, it's deplorable. And that just that natural guilt, because anytime you endure trauma, your first instinct, that first kind of a instinctive reaction is to assume you did something wrong, and we need reasonable people to help people work through those feelings. Never taking accountability, ever in the worst financial predicament, he says, "I deserve that." Yeah, not taking into account we're living in an era of economic terrorism. I mean, this Republican government is using economic terrorism. They have billionaire welfare. They just hand over billions and billions of dollars. They're trying to pre-fund this white supremacy Reich for the next 10,000 years, mortgaging our future to give money to those guys. There's always money for Charlie Kirk. There's money for Joe Rogan. There's never any money for people who speak kindness. Um, he broke a contract with me, lied to me about my money that was owed, manipulated me financially. A lot of blame, no accountability. Yep. And that's the narcissistic profile. That's the white supremacy profile. And he'd probably be humiliated if you set him down for discovery in a judicial setting. But that's what he needs to go through because people need to see the reality and get away from their white supremacy narrative. We have no autonomy in anything. It's all a facade, and that's absolutely true. And I managed to get facade right because I'm thinking about pronunciation thanks to neurodivergent. Kat says, Natasha, yes, the mind fuck is the problem. I feel like this war with Trump is all psychological, and it's ongoing, and it came before him. He's a consequence of how much we've been brainwashed. And yesterday it happened, like I said, was really, really brilliant anti-racism activists. There was like 3 times I had to speak up and say, you have no obligation to assume that. And I said, you have no obligation to assume that rich people got rich because they earned it, that you can make them prove it. You're totally right in making them prove it. So put aside all those arguments about, justifying rich people. Put them aside. Make them prove it in every instance. They won't do it. They'll get mad. They won't release their tax returns. We've heard that refrain before too, right? So don't make those assumptions. And it takes a while because we're indoctrinated to make these assumptions, these charitable assumptions that help white supremacists bubble out of us all the time. And you have to make a deliberate effort, just as deliberate as if you're quitting drinking, to reject the indoctrination of white supremacy. And a lot of it is just that passive stuff where it's not even you being a racist. It's you just not holding racists accountable. That's a big part of this. And yeah, like Natasha keeps saying, it's like the brainwashing, the MK Ultra stuff. Yeah, there's a process. We are not in control of our thoughts. We make these assumptions based on these lies that we've been told. You can have that awakening. That's why the woke term, where that comes from. But it's bit by bit, little by little. But just try it. I mean, it would actually, everything I'm saying to you now is a lot. If you do nothing else, but over the next week, rid yourself of the assumption that billionaires have earned their money. Just rid yourself of that by just constantly, every time it comes to your mind, and it'll creep in there without conscious awareness. Well, you'll find yourself justifying rich people. And you have to make it so that doesn't happen anymore, to the extent that when you're in conversations with people and they mention it, it rattles you. Say, actually, I have to correct that. And that's how we make massive, massive progress. When we have 94 people here today, wonderful. When we have 94 people doing that and we undermine these things, we're getting close. We're getting close to the point. Like for 2 years, I've felt that people are reluctant to denounce our criminal president. He's a criminal. He's a criminal. We can say that. It's a fact. That should be taught in schools. He is a criminal. And in communities, people are still reluctant to just say that basic truth. They aren't reluctant to say that about Nixon. Nixon is a criminal. That's fine. People will say that. We'll get to a point in our society where people will say that about the current regime and how corrupt it was and how it was the most corrupt regime in human history. We will get there. And more people are becoming, I'm feeling it because I sense it in the way people, I'm pretty good at reading. You read the body language and the bowed heads are kind of going away and it's just bubbling up to the surface. People are just bursting to say certain things. You can see when they come up to you and they're just like, they got something on their mind. You can tell. And they want to denounce this criminal regime. They want to stop giving taxpayer dollars to pedophiles, our money, or to billionaires as part of billionaire welfare. We have to do all the work. They get to reap all the rewards. That's bullshit. And, in talking with Will about it yesterday, too, and he was just talking about how leading with love, he puts it that way. And people are like, well, how are you going to get profit from that? As if profit justifies everything. That's another lie. Profit doesn't justify anything. Quit thinking that. That's the lie of America. Oh, they're just trying to make money. They're abducting children. Not paying your workers is called slavery. I know it's good for the bottom line, but it's also called slavery. So profit is bad, and quit using it to justify things. There have to be, it's funny though, too, because you crack through sometimes. I made a note. I'm just like, because people were rejecting the idea of democratic socialism. So I'm like, why don't we call it ethical capitalism? And people were just laughing. They're like, oh, can't have that. That's you can't have that. Like you know how much corruption is out there. And it's just sometimes if you just dislodge people from the way they've heard things before, then they can recognize the truth. And it helps them go and reflect on these other assumptions that they have that hurt them. So, all right, let me get back to what neurodivergent said. I made all of them make mistakes on purpose to overcome the embarrassment. Yeah. I would model a mistake. Oh, nothing better than a teacher. I always did that. As a teacher and as a parent, early on, I'd say, yep, I messed up. I made a mistake. I apologize. And that changes everything in a classroom when you're willing to tell your kids that. It's like, look, I'm going to make mistakes too. Because they know otherwise. They know you're making mistakes, and then they sit there being angry and they have that frustration with you. And it's like, if you're just like being truthful, if you don't force people to believe things that aren't true, they don't get frustrated. So I don't have behavioral issues as a teacher. Yeah. And as to the Model 1, I also deliberately made mistakes during lessons and praised them when they caught it. Oh, good. That's a clever tactic. Yep. And Natasha, it's psychological warfare and social engineering. We have to recognize this. The Republicans are a terrorist organization. You have to start saying that. I mean, they're killing our kids. They're giving our taxpayer money to pedophiles and child rapists and child traffickers and murderers. And, stop. People still give me with that. Well, we have to understand their point of view. I understand it and reject it. They're bad. So give yourself permission to just recognize the truth, and respond in accordance to the truth. You'll be more effective. Because if you're trying to build these plans based on a false assumption that the Republicans will somehow grow some ethics, you're going to fail. You're going to be frustrated. It's a waste of your life. It's a waste of your effort. This is a precious gift. And the more we just recognize truth, even when it makes us feel humble, especially when it makes us feel, and that's a mistake. It should be especially, not saying even, especially. Humility is a good thing. Being humbled is a good thing. When somebody humiliates you and you say, thank you, I was wrong there. Thank you. That is spiritual and emotional maturity. So like the rejection of humiliation, it's problematic. And yeah, it can be leveraged in a way that's unfair. But if you've fortified yourself where you have learned to take accountability and appreciate being humble, and somebody tries to humiliate you, you'll recognize it's like, oh, what you're doing, the lesson I'm supposed to learn, it's not effective what you're saying. And you'll become empowered to handle these false counselors who try to leverage humiliation against you. But again, it's one of those things that's a process because I wouldn't humiliate a kid, but I would sure as shit humiliate the president if I had an opportunity to talk to him. You don't use it against children because children are open and innocent and and that's what the white supremacists do. So it's sort of like we live in a society, I guess maybe this is the clearest way of saying it. White supremacists, they use this ideology where they take little kids and they just crush them with humiliation. And then later in life, the white supremacists feel that they get an exception from that. They should never be treated that way. And it's evil to treat people like that. Where I believe children should never be treated with humiliation. But as people become adults, humiliation's on the table, especially if you start spewing a bunch of bullshit that leads to kids being abused and exploited and tortured and murdered and raped like the white supremacists do, like the Republicans do. All right, here we go. I have this cardinal rule that if I was a manager, yeah, and see, that's another thing. I would criticize in private and praise in public. And that's a different situation where we're talking about a manager who is, I mean, you can always humiliate up. I would never humiliate down. There's times when I've taught high schoolers and it's like, it's a different kind of thing where these high school boys, you do have to do something about that toxic rape culture. And that needs to be smashed out pretty fast. So I guess I have ridden some boys pretty hard. But if that means they don't go out and commit a date rape, then I don't apologize for that. But yeah, as a manager, as a boss, yeah, nobody who worked under me. I don't like having people work under me. It's another thing. Howard says I do, so good. Madam Power, I like that name. Psychological warfare for total information control. And we have to work through these things. And and now there'll be stops and starts as I give these kind of talks. These are informal talks. Like Lefty Prof said, we're brainstorming ideas out loud. Some stuff, work through it too. I mean, if I say something that really resonated wrong, could be because I just misspoke or I got speaking too fast and I got ahead of my thoughts and I left out a word or two. That happens even when I type. So ruminate on it and then come back and we'll talk about it again. and that's how we make progress. But don't fall for the white supremacy lie of saying, "Well, this stuff is just off the table because that'll never work. That'll get them set." That's eliminate that. All those things that they've told us are lies. We've I just the article I wrote today was how child rapists have been lecturing us about how we're not good enough all of our lives. I bet we've all met a lot of them. I bet we've all worked for what or for rapists, child rapists, who have then come into the room and criticized us for our work and accused us and belittled us. And we've sat there taking it. And when you wake into the fact that this person who did all these things, who I worked so hard to try and please, and they never acknowledged any of my efforts, that person was a child rapist? And it makes you have to then reassess your whole life and all the things you went through. This takes time. Give yourself time. Rest is resistance. Remember that too. Uh, I gotta say the name right again. Vegan Cindy says, my stepfather would make us all sit in the car until I kissed him on the cheek before he would drive away. Humiliating. Yeah, I mean that's an act of sexual misconduct on his part there, and so somebody should be humiliating him for sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. That'd be these, and that's the case. Too often, it's the case where the person who is the survivor of sexual assault is the one who gets humiliated. We need to turn it around and humiliate these child rapists, these child abusers. Um, and I think maybe those of us who have overcome that, who've had to endure that, we don't want to wish that on anybody, but they leverage it, and it's just this tool that's out there that we have to understand. We can't. It's I think our thoughts about the concept of humiliation are part of this trauma center, where we just push humiliation over to the corner. We don't. What we're doing right now is a process of evaluating trauma. So, like the concept of humiliation, yes, it's something you feel when somebody abuses you. So we don't even want to think about it. But being humble is good, and it's so important, and the reality is we have an administration that has no humility. They've never had to try to practice accountability. They've never gotten better at anything. They've never put themselves in a situation where they were forced to recognize that their assumptions about women, for example, were not true, or their assumptions about their own intellect or abilities were not true. And so being humble is important. Yeah. Yeah, Sandra writes, "My brother says I'm not racist. I repeat what the racists say." Well, okay. That's one of those ones that's like, "Keep talking. Just keep talking. Let's hear what else you have to say. Keep going. Say some more." Yeah, they'll and give them enough rope to hang themselves, as they say. Derek says, "Rules for thee and not for me." Yep, and that's the entire white supremacy dogma, and that's why you have to point it out. And then they get really upset when you point out their hypocrisies. And then they default to our trauma on the thought of humiliation and use that, knowing that we've endured humiliation, to prevent us from calling them out on their crimes. I think that's the process at work. Diane says, I responded, yes, my child was still, yeah. Yeah. I mean, talking about these people that have no concept that sexual orientation is just something that it's just you're born with. Neurodivergent says that's true. So good. I don't know what it referred to, but I'm glad I said something true. So much saving to do. It's mind blowing. Yeah. You know, a lot of white supremacy, it's so much just targets kids. And if we can change, we can eliminate white supremacy in a generation. I really strongly believe that. We just have to start reaching out, stopping these white supremacists because they always bully little kids and they retreat from adults because they're cowards. So if we have to defend our kids from these white supremacists. That's really a simple way of putting it. And within a generation, it'll go away because this is not something that it occurred because of our lack of responsibility. And that goes back hundreds of years. Howard said, I was lucky to have lots of education available growing up. And yeah, I was always surrounded by books. Fortunate for that. Books in my house. Good movies too. Natasha says, I've been at something, Ken Martin on Blue Sky this morning. Talking, must be. Adding. Okay. Doubt he'll respond. Yeah, sometimes I do. Keep trying, keep sending out those messages. I send a lot of messages to these representatives and candidates, and yeah, any bit we can get where this becomes more the nationalized conversation, the quicker we'll make process. Christians who are not Christian. I would say that white supremacy is a rotting branch on the tree of Christianity. It's a defilement of Christianity, but it is the exact same mechanism. And white supremacists consider themselves to be Christian. And I mean, it's just how they're perverted. There are many different interpretations. There's many different branches of Christianity, and they all think that they are the one legitimate branch. Recognize that white supremacy is a rotten branch on the tree of Christianity. Yeah. Well, advance, whatever. He's waging war on Catholics, on Roman Catholics. I wish people would talk about that, but he's part of it. They're rounding up Roman Catholics and putting them in concentration camps in the United States. Our tax dollars are paying for it. Children are getting raped. People are getting disappeared. It's got to stop. Judith says, I attended Lutheran school from K through 12 in Michigan. Nothing more racist than a white Christian. Yeah. I mean, and I do have to say, it's like I thought that, and then because I've really had a lot of Christian abuse in my life, but in the last couple weeks, I actually got to the point of desperation, and there was this pastor who always came to the basketball games, and he was watching, and I'm like, okay, let's see what you got. And I said, I'm here because I'm afraid ICE is going to come and kidnap and murder my daughter, and I wanted to see what his reaction would be, and he was very open to it. And so there are some good. I don't know what it is. If it's Lutheran, I don't know what branch of the Christian tree he is. But I've called him a couple times, and I'm trying to get so he lets me come and talk to his congregation. So there are a couple good ones, but yes, Judith, your sentiment, I totally. Until like 2 weeks ago, that was exactly how I thought. But I think if we can start in with this argument about how this regime is targeting Roman Catholics for extermination, we can maybe awaken some of the potentially good ones who just have not heard these arguments, who are sitting in churches, and I hope we can. But yeah, I understand what you're saying there too, Judith. Stacey says, especially now, the Pope is not a fan. Yeah, I mean, the Pope knows everybody in South America is Roman Catholic, and this administration is rounding them up and putting them in concentration camps. So I'm glad the Pope's speaking out. He grew up in Peru. They keep claiming him as an American, but he spent most of his life in Peru. Natasha says, "Oh my God, I went to a Christian school in Michigan. It was the only Christian school I attended. I was given a decision to go back there, be homeschooled. Yeah, and I know those Christian schools. My daughter went to one, and it's like all the I mean, it's white supremacy. I keep saying if you're pro-life, that's a white supremacy argument. She went in there, there's all this white supremacy BS, and somebody had drawn some swastikas on a table. I'm like, that happens. You take pictures of it. I'm going to send a letter to this school and to the papers and tell them to stop sending taxpayer money to this school because they can't control their kids and they're drawing swastikas on things. And then, but people, because it's Christian, they're just like, that's another thing. They close their minds and they're like, no, we can't get that. Neurodivergent taught adults in China. That's excellent. Oh, okay. And kids. Yeah. And Stephen Miller, not let them never be forgotten. And we have to stop it as soon as possible. Polly writes, my Caucasian kids grew up in a red rural area and didn't fit in. Too many kids were mean and racist. Yeah, rural areas are hard, and it's just like that's got to be fixed. Kids are, and I'm as a sensitive person growing up in a place like that, it almost killed me, and that's got to be fixed. Oh, New York City has stricter gun laws. Yep, and they work. Gun laws work. The National Firearms Act. I've been reading about how to protect yourself against narcissism. It's just fully a narcissistic approach: intimidation, denial, bullying, blaming. Yep. Lefty Prof says, yes, Christianity is just one of the tools used by white supremacists, but our Constitution is white supremacist. That's true, too. I wrote an article on that, too. I want to rewrite the whole thing, remove the language that has caused all the problems, like all men are created equal, roll the amendments into, and move forward. I think we need to reassess our Constitution, too. It has outlived its usefulness. Natasha says, it's safer. I remember in Queens, it feels much safer there than in Delaware. Interesting. White supremacists are nihilists. That's true. I'm going to start scrolling down here. Homeschooling is not, well, homeschooling is not improving the quality of education the kids are getting overall. And that's part of this parental, we got to talk more about, most parents aren't qualified to be the educators of their kids. I got my teaching license partly so if I had to take my kids out of school, I knew I was qualified to teach them. Fortunately, we've had a pretty good school district here, but normally, yeah, that's another place where people are just allowed. We just turn our heads and allow parents to abuse their kids. That's too much part of the American system, and that's something we have to start recognizing. Neurodivergent says, I grew up in a farm town. Looking back, I can speculate which kids had shitty parents, which had average ones, which had emotionally mature ones. Yeah, and I'm at the point too where at 50, I've seen which ones have died, which ones are in jail. Kind of connect a lot of dots that way. Stacy writes, the people who scream the loudest on the right are guilty. I follow a lot of black creators who call out white behavior that would say, if it pisses you off, maybe you should think about why. And that's really critical. Reading things like Martin Luther King, people have walked through what we're going through right now before. Where do we go from here is an outline for what we need to do. So read that if you're feeling frustrated. All right. I'm struggling with the no context stuff. The guilt is so bad. Oh no. Okay. Okay, Stacey. You have to go not contact with toxic people. And it gets easier. It's just like I've said before, it's just like quitting drinking. It takes about 3 months and then you get a lot better. Um, but yeah, I mean, if they've made the choice, that's the other important thing to say. When you set boundaries and then that means people are out of your life, they've made that choice. It wasn't you, it was them. So just keep reminding yourself that when they are perfectly welcome to come back once they conform to the model of a decent human being who is positive to you. Thanks, Walter from Cat. I know I need to sue and I feel bad. Oh, don't feel bad. You have to sue. That disclosure is exactly. I mean, if he committed a crime, hold them accountable. I know that holding people accountable for crimes humiliates them, but that's a good thing. See, defiance is money. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and then we have a story about rape here, and yeah. I'm glad that you were able to forgive yourself, and that wasn't your fault. These sexual assaults, these abuses against us, they're not our fault. And this cruel society makes us believe they are. We have to put all that aside. It's not asking too much to be treated with dignity. It's not asking for too much for a society where basic needs are taken care of because we pay for it all with our work, with our labor. They take it. We're not compensated enough, and then they take extra from our taxes. We deserve more than what we have in the United States. Never feel guilty, and all these abuse cultures try to make you feel guilty because it's a natural response when you've been abused. You first think you must have done something, and it's not the case. We have all these cruel people that have leveraged that instinctive response. Natasha says it's not transparent because it's for profit, but if they were transparent, maybe more people would join. Yeah. Wonderful talk, people, today. This has been a lovely thought. I'm just kind of going to scroll through and see. Maybe I'll get all the way to the bottom. People kind of start. Oh, here's a long one. Okay. David says it's hard at first to identify with the abuser and do the work to change your story that you tell yourself, but it's worth it. You are not your abuser's story. You are your own story. Yeah, I wrote about that. I called it shame loading, where these abusers create a narrative about you that justifies their abuse of you, and then they spread it around. And other people then approach you, having heard this shame loaded story, where they think you're just fundamentally evil person who deserved all the things they did to you. And you have to combat that narrative. And that's what the DNC has to do. They have to combat the narratives, but they don't because they're as much to the right as the Republicans are. So we're doing that process right now. We're combating those narratives of lies to empower ourselves. You're not your abuser's story, your own story. Let it be self-love and self-kindness. Absolutely. Positive self-image every day. And that's the importance of doing something like a marathon or a ski race or even just like a 5K. You get a sense of achievement. I did something. I did something good. And my dad, I skied the Berkey one time and he just said, did you train enough where you don't embarrass yourself? I'm just like, buddy, I was in the first wave at the time. But everything he said had to be framed in a way where he belittled my achievements. And eventually I'm like, not going to be around you if that's what you're going to do. Yeah. You'll live your life in a forever hug and your independence will be the best feeling ever. Nice comment, David. Thank you. Yeah. In the workplace, you cannot humiliate him. I've done it, but it's always been jobs where I didn't really need uh yeah, there's tricky. Yeah, I tried that once and was fired. Yeah. Uh, that's a good talk. I would like to have a talk about that. Okay, I'm gonna have to read Madam Power stuff. Thank you, Neurodivergent. Yes, there's so many people I love here. I love all you guys. All these brilliant comments. This has been such a joy, not just today included, of course, but all of the time I've been on Substack, being able to meet so many brilliant people like all of you and just hearing these and being held accountable by all of you. And yes, there have been times when people have made comments and called me out and I felt humiliated, but I thank you for humiliating me when I'm wrong because I want to be able to grow. I want to be humble and get better. Heather says, I never thought of the benefits of my humiliation as an adult, but it's actually very freeing to be able to stop self. Yes, yes, wonderful. What a great comment. Thank you, Heather. Uh, Making me blush. Oh, good. That's from Madam Power. So now I'm really excited to read her work. Um, yeah, I wish I had more time to read more stuff, but I'm so busy doing all these other things. Actually, the conversations are the best way, but I've been finding I've been doing so many voice notes because I had so many thoughts. I've been doing these short voice notes, and I have so many on my phone that I haven't got to. So this is more effective doing these morning talks like this, just to kind of get everything out, like all the mess that's in my mind right now, just kind of get it out and talk about these things. And hopefully we'll continue little bits of it will stick and then we'll revisit them too. And then it's kind of captured too. And if anything I said inspires you, please if there's something you want to talk about or do it in the form of an article and tag me in it and I'll restack it, that would be wonderful. Please do that. Especially in particular, the things where you're like, I don't think Walter was right about this, and give me the opportunity to respond rather than, blocking me. Give me the opportunity to respond or to learn from what you said or to see your perspective or to change how I said it so I could be more clear in my own thing that I was trying to convey. So yes, please, wonderful. This rising together, there's so many brilliant people, and this oligarch-owned controlled media has made us forget how much we're surrounded by brilliance. So thank you guys. Diane said, "I'm a very proud Minneapolis resident. Folks are showing up in profound ways, so creative, brave, and bold. I've been so proud of Minneapolis too. I've had so many friends over there. They're all skiers. See a lot of Berkey hats at the demonstrations, the peaceful demonstrations. It's terrible and beautiful here. There's a combo of humiliating the ICE agents and inviting them to leave. There are lots of different roles. Yes." Oh, Walter doesn't know we're 15 minutes. You're right. I don't. I'm just I'm trying to catch up. So I'm gonna try to start slowing down here. So maybe not so many chats. Yeah. I'm trying to get through them all. I'm not even close, but I want to address a lot of these comments. I'm trying to roll through quickly. Thank you guys. You guys are also wonderful. Natasha said, I didn't know that was a possibility. I wonder what that was in reference to. And I should kind of try to get back down, but I'm looking for some good ones here. I want to say that it's supremacy and Christian nationalism to keep the homeschoolers homeschooling. Yep. White supremacy is a rotten branch of Christianity, and the other Christian groups have to denounce it. Instead of saying, do you denounce Satan and all his race? You should be saying, do you denounce white supremacy and all the evil that comes with white supremacy? Yeah. Attacking women, misogyny is part of white supremacy. Economic terrorism is what we're enduring today. They're stealing all our money. Uh, yeah. Well, you know what, Stacy? If they need help, then you're in a position of power. Make them apologize. If they refuse to apologize, I guess they don't need that much help. Thank you, Sandra. That's so lovely. Sandra says I'm getting your paid subscription. I might as well use that and pitch it because it's like I all the paid subscriptions are really, really helpful. You always give me a boost when you give me a paid subscription. That being said, I know a lot of people. We're all up against the wall economically. That's by design. It's economic terrorism, but we're going to keep working here. And like I was saying with Will Fullwood, if we get some really good, I'm going to continue to talk to these progressive candidates. If a couple of them get in, this election cycle, the next election cycle, at this point, it doesn't end with the end of this regime. At this point, we're all in on getting universal health care, universal education. So this needs your support. And hopefully as we get going, because I'm not in this to be rich, I'm just in this to survive. I was reflecting on that and living all your life in poverty. I mean, writing is one of those things where it's like, okay, I get to write, but I also get to like fix all the things in my house because I can't afford to bring anybody else to do that. But we're going to work for that better society. We're going to work for that society that actually treats our kids as they deserve to be treated. That safety net for everybody. That's what we're going to work for. And there is so much money out there. The billionaires, I keep saying the tax thing. If we just stop giving billions to billionaires, we don't even have to tax them because they'll all just go away. And there's so much out there that we should be demanding and asking for. So we'll continue to speak that message. We'll get out there. You guys keep showing up. We're going to get there. I promise you. Kat says, thank you, Walter. I'm personally having a shitty day and you're putting it all in perspective. Good, Kat. We need to do another talk sometime. It's been a while since we've talked. Yes. Oh, good. I'm down to the end. I finally caught up with the chat. You guys are so great. Natasha says, yeah, okay. LOL, right. I wonder what was that in reference to? I hope it was me. Deb says, my mind is filled with all this evil and cruel people. Yes, yes. We have been programmed to enable white supremacy, and that's the real trick. And I think people, when they get touchy, when you're like, that's racist, because we're not racist, but if we've been programmed to just be passive when confronted with racist, to listen to this, we can't humiliate, we can't push back against them. I really wish Kamala Harris would have put the president into narcissistic collapse during the debate. She was close. All she had to do was push a little bit more. When she started saying the stuff like people aren't coming to his shows because he's repeating it, he's boring, they leave early. He was about to lose it. She just had to push a little farther, and you should do that because if we don't take the power away from white supremacists, they're gonna use it to rape kids, you know? So get over this. When you meet somebody who is just openly evil, who is saying openly evil things, don't act like they have a legitimate position. Give yourself position to do that. Yeah, he was angry, and just his weakness. We need to expose his weakness. People are seeing it now because he's getting smaller. He's still like, but now he's like, he's getting less and less relevant. So that's good. Yes, I would love it. Polly says, "Alta, that's great. You'll share the others' thoughts. I really do try to help to promote all the other people. Just tag me. I'll do my best to see it. I scroll through. I get a lot of announcements, but if I see it, I'll definitely respond. And I just do what I can. And if I write a response article, I'll tag you. And so then things can build up that way. Just let's do it. I mean, this is a collective process, and we just need to keep open that awareness of an academic disagreement, where that doesn't mean that that person is your enemy. It's like we're looking at things from nuanced, different angles. White supremacists have weaponized the idea of a nuanced position. Put that aside. Among honestly intellectual people who are working towards progress, you can have nuanced perspectives, and there have been a lot of times. I've especially learned this last year where something that I initially thought was just absolutely wrong, I've come around to. And I learned this in my physics classes too when I was taking physics, where your intuition is one thing, you do the actual math and you realize you're exactly wrong. That's humility. We need to have that humility. And I'm getting better at it. I mean, a year ago, I was blocking a lot more people. I still recognize a lot of bot comments. When people started calling me like the R word or whatever, it's like they're getting blocked. But if we could just have that academic discussion where we compare how we view things and we give each other a bit of grace. Because I understand we're surrounded by enemies. It's easy to think that these people that seem to be allies are actually our enemies, and often that's the case with people like Adam Kinzinger, who continues to be a status quo guy. He continues to brainwash people to make you think you have to support somebody like him instead of somebody like me, even though he's not going to be out there advocating for universal health care ever. And he's just leveraging his wealth because he's benefited from this false and unjust system. And those of us who have lived out like just in poverty all of our lives, we know all that is a lie. And I've deliberately, yeah, there's a lot of guys. You're making good. I'm not going to read them, Natasha, but I agree with what you said. There's so many out there. So just follow. Like I said, if you can afford to be a paid subscriber, always be a paid subscriber. Support the smaller people like me with the transparent check mark. You can get up to the solid orange, but once it gets up to solid purple, you don't have to support those people anymore. They've got plenty of money. They don't need to be making $10 million a month on Substack, and they're not using it to promote. If I was making, I wouldn't want to make that much. Getting up to the orange Substack, orange check mark would be pretty reasonable. And that would allow me to support a lot of other creators like I want to do and do more advocacy to help get things like universal healthcare installed. But we got to get away from this idea that these guys that are already making millions who haven't done anything for us ever are going to somehow do it for us now. They're not going to. We need a new crop of people, new crop of voices. So thank you, Neurodivergent. Thank you for being here. Wonderful childhood. Great. New York City would be interesting. I can't afford it, but I'm not watching. Yeah, that's the other thing. Don't watch the State of the Nation. Just don't even watch. It's all going to be lies. There's no point in even watching it. All right, I'm at 9:18, and at 10 o'clock, I am going to go and talk with Nick. I haven't talked with Nick for a little bit of time. I think this is last week was the first week in like a year that I didn't chat with Nick. He's been a really great help to me, Nick Perro of Sick of This Shit and Banner and Backbone and a couple other things. So at 10 o'clock, I'll be talking to him. I should probably go drink a little bit of tea or with some honey to help my vocal cords. But Nick helps me. He can do a lot of the talking. And I like to get all my thoughts off my chest in the morning so I don't have to just dominate the microphone when I get on with somebody else. Again, tomorrow, please put this on your calendars if you're still here. Tomorrow, Wednesday at 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm talking again with Melissa Corrigan and Francesca Hong, who's running for governor in the state of Wisconsin. She's wonderful. She's exactly the new type of politician that we need, somebody that will listen to us. So please come in, tune into that. Those of you who know, think outside the box. If you guys have got businesses that want support, I could wear a hat. If you want to give me an advertisement type contract to support, my newsletter, and then you can write it off, see, as a business expense. So we can take advantage of some of the tax code stuff. If you guys want to talk about things like that, I'd love to do it. And then I can use that to help some other creators. So that'll be some thoughts. But yes, definitely. Tomorrow, show up for the talk with Francesca Hong. I learned so much from my writing group. Yep. Support group, accountability. Absolutely. I'm gonna read through this. Thank you, Howard. All right. I'm down to the end. I know what. Oh my god. Oh my god. Yeah. You guys are wonderful. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. I was glad I was able to get here early because my kids are out of town, and so I miss them, but I have you guys for now. And yeah, I'm looking forward to your articles. Tag me. I would love to respond. And together we rise, we keep supporting each other, we keep growing. We're all learning on this journey together. We've got a long way to go, but we're gonna win because more and more people have awakened to the reality of all the lies that we've been taught. All these lies are hurting us. We can push them off of us and we don't lose anything. So just keep working through them, recondition yourself so you become somebody who fights white supremacy instead of one who passively enables it. And that's everybody. That's not an accusation. That's what this society indoctrinated into us against our will. We don't have to live like that anymore. We can live better. We can all rise together. Love you all. Thank you. I'll leave it for now and join me again in exactly 40 minutes with Nick. We'll see you then. Bye bye.